Greetings from the Guild, gamers! I'm Guildmaster Jason. Welcome to TableTalk Tuesday. The topic of today's Table Talk is deception, persuasion, and insight checks. Now, as most of you know, the way this normally works is when a character tries to lie or persuade somebody into doing something different than what they were planning on doing, that person would then contest their deception or persuasion check against whoever they're trying to lie to or convince's insight check. Now, the problem with this system is it can create some unrealistic interactions. Well, gee, I normally pay twice that much gold just for me to get these wares, but you're a persuasive guy, I suppose I could give it to you for half that much. Now, it's also worth mentioning that my first DM had a system where occasionally, instead of saying roll for persuasion or roll for deception, he would say, persuade me, or deceive me. Now, the cool thing about doing this is it creates some really realistic interactions. Your players now actually have to persuade individuals or successfully lie to individuals to get whatever it is that they're trying to accomplish. Instead of just having to roll for something and making it kind of hard to explain from a storytelling aspect. Now, the problem with doing this is it doesn't take that character's abilities into account. Lots of us roll characters that are much more charismatic in character than we are in person, let's be honest. So it might seem unfair that I have to rely on my own real-life charisma as opposed to my character's charisma, who is much more charismatic than me. I mean, what's next? Making people lift weights for athletics checks? So if you guys have seen my Table Talk Tuesday videos before, you know I normally like to present a problem, present the two extremes, and a compromise. Instead of picking and choosing between situations where this time you roll for it, this time you actually have to persuade me, what you can do is, anytime your characters make a persuasion or deception check, ask them, how are you deceiving them? How are you persuading them? What are you saying? If that person makes a compelling point or a compelling lie, then they get an advantage on the roll. However, if that person stumbles over their speech while they're trying to lie, or maybe can't really produce any supporting details to whatever they're trying to convince that person of, then they get disadvantage on the roll. This way you're taking into account a realistic aspect of trying to push conversation the way you want it in a way that it would actually happen in real life, while still taking the character's abilities into account. Oh, my good sir, I regret to inform you that you seem to be viewing this as a single sale rather than an investment, which I regret to inform you is the improper mindset. Allow me to be forthcoming with you. I represent a very powerful and massive organization, a Mages Guild to be precise. Now, say perhaps I was able to procure some quality components for our spells at a, say, reasonable price. Perhaps I might be swayed to share my positive opinions of your fine establishment with my colleagues, which I assure you are numerous as well as very, very wealthy. Roll for persuasion at advantage. That's how that works. Also take into account the person rolling insight. Now, if this person rolling insight is an NPC rather than another player at the table, maybe consider setting a DC instead of having them roll for it. For an example, let's say you have an NPC who paid a certain amount of gold for his wares. Now here comes your players trying to convince him to sell his wares for something much lower than that. Obviously he's a merchant, he's in this to make a profit, and it's not going to be easy to convince him to sell his wares for less than he even paid for them. So a check like that might have a DC of well over 25. Or in a situation like that as a DM, you might just choose to make it entirely impossible. However, in situations like this, it's definitely vital that you make sure you set the DC before telling the player to roll for it. As a DM, you always want to try and maintain the illusion that you're prepared for anything. If a player can visibly see you deciding whether or not a DC is higher or lower than what they rolled after they already rolled it, it kind of takes away from that illusion. Finally, I'd just like to add that this rule doesn't just have to only be for deception and persuasion. You could apply this rule to any ability check, saving throw, or even attack roll for that matter. Whenever your players try to tell you to do something, instead of simply saying roll for it, ask them, how are you doing that? I'm going to check for traps. How? I'm going to move very stealthily. How? I'm going to climb down the wall. How? Just like with persuasion and deception, if your players come up with a good idea about how they want to do whatever they want to do, you can give them advantage on that roll. But the same thing applies for disadvantage. On top of that, it just adds a little bit more flavor, depth, and role play to your game, which makes everyone more immersed, which makes everyone have more fun, in my opinion at least. I slowly and cautiously crossed the corridor, scanning the floor for inconsistencies, the walls for openings, or anything harnessed to the ceiling. Cool! Make an investigation check at advantage. I slink flat against the wall and use the overhang from the building to blend into the shadows. Cool! Make a stealth check at advantage. I tie my rope around my baton and hammer it into the stone surface, then throw my rope over down to the lower portion of the room and lower myself down. Awesome! Make an athletics check at advantage. As always, these are just some things that I do in my games, and I might advise you guys to do in yours. But take it with a grain of salt if you don't think it would work for your table. If you guys have anything to say about this video, feel free to drop some comments. If you have any ideas for our next Table Talk Tuesday, be sure to send us a message. The best way to get a hold of us is through our Facebook page. Until next time, game on, gamers.